Every single one of us spends every single day of our lives thinking. Even the person whose words or actions are so bizarre or outlandish or even dangerous that we are prompted to ask, "What were you thinking?" Even that person was thinking. And in today's conversation, I sat down with a young man who has spent much of his life thinking about thinking. I'm Brian Johnson, and this is Nobody You Know. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Nobody You Know, and this week I get to perform something of an experiment. This program was born out of my realization that all of those late night talk shows, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Fallon, all of them, past, present, and probably future, feature famous people. They get the latest, the actor in the latest hit movie, they get the rock star who's off on his next concert tour. They never get the little people. They never get the world full of people who are interesting. And I came up with two taglines for this show. You don't have to be famous to be fascinating. And everyone is interesting. And so today we're going to do something that I thought of back when I was planning the show, back when I was first coming up with it. And that is talking to somebody and not even knowing what I'm talking about when we start. Someday when the weather warms up, I want to go down to the park or downtown with a sandwich board that says, "Why are you interesting?" And just talk with people, 20, 25 minutes if they've got time to spare, and find something in a total stranger that makes them interesting. Now, this is Jesse Cole, and right now across the bottom of your screen you're seeing the title of today's episode, but I don't know what it's going to be. And I picked Jesse because I know him, but I only know a couple of things about you. One, you run the tech department at your church,
Yep.
And two, you're engaged to be married.
I am.
I do not know what you do for fun. I do not know what your life has been like. If you have any interesting life experiences, I realize we have known each other for a couple of years now, and I know practically nothing about you.
Who am I?
Exactly. So today we're going to find that interesting thing in Jesse, and you'll probably see a lot of cuts and edits as we try to find that subject and see if we can prove that Jesse is interesting. Do you think you're interesting, Jesse?
I guess there's only one way to find out.
There is. So I don't know. Let's start with how long have you lived in Redmond?
2 years.
Really? When
Yeah.
did you move here?
Well, I was in college at Wheaton College, so.
Well, I didn't count.
Okay, so my parents moved here when I first started college about 5 years ago,
Okay.
and then I just came home for summers.
Where did y'all live before that?
Roseville, California.
Ooh.
Yep.
Were you born in California?
Yep.
What kinds of things fascinated you growing up?
Thinking. I always loved thinking and music. Those are probably the two biggest fascinations.
Okay. Define thinking.
Metacognition. I'd think about thinking. I just liked, Sherlock Holmes, and I read. So in middle school, I read Sherlock Holmes, and
Okay.
I was so fascinated how he was able to make so much of so little. You know, he would look at a case and be like, "Oh yeah, this person had this ink splatter behind their left ear, and it reminded me of this." I don't know, but he would reason and use logic to jump to these huge conclusions, which always end up being true.
Well, of course, he had the benefit of having those clues planted there by Arthur Conan Doyle, but
Yes.
but that nevertheless inspired you to think more.
I always think that everyone is a psychologist, and so just understanding how to relate to people well and communicate, I've always really loved learning that.
Everyone's a psychologist. Okay, let's run with that for a minute here. Tell me what you mean by that.
I mean that we all have to figure out how to relate to each other, and when we approach a conversation, we kind of make deductions about the other person, who they are, what they're like, how to communicate with them effectively, when to cut them off if they're talking too long.
Well, you'll know when this episode is over because he'll just get up and leave. But
I think from an early age, I always thought just a lot in my head, and I always found it as kind of a safe place because I could think as much as I wanted or as little as I wanted, and no one could really intervene in my thoughts, and that was kind of exciting to me.
Did you think about anything in particular? I mean, you say you were inspired by Sherlock Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you at any point ever imagine that you'd become a detective because of what you learned? Or, I mean, thinking is a pretty broad subject.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to see if did it in your life, did it fall into a particular area?
So I'll tell you about, well, okay, I'm going to start by telling you there's a book that I really want to write. And it's going to be...
Don't give away too much, but...
How to think. Because when I was little, I wished I had someone who taught me how to use my thoughts, where to put them, how to think about things. Because I had a lot of thoughts and I didn't know what to do with them or what to think about, even. Because if you have all this time to think, which I guess I had a lot of time to think, you want to be thinking about something worthwhile and valuable. But all that to say, the book would start with humans' greatest superpower, and that is listening. I think our ability to learn from others is the most powerful thing we can do, or from learning anything. Because if you can learn something instantly, wouldn't that make you like the most elite person? I don't know. Like, you could just sit down at a piano and play the piano. You can learn... the faster you can learn, the more ability you have to do pretty much anything. And so, but it starts with listening, and I use that as a broad category because when I was in community college, I took a class just on listening, and I loved it so much. And just that we have so much power to give another person our attention, we can learn so much from them. And one of my professors in college always said that boredom is a function of predictability. So if you can predict everything that's going to happen, you'll be really bored by it. And that's true about any kind of art. So something that stands out catches your attention. Well, and he also said that boredom is the fault of the listener, because I would be really bored if I'm not really engaging my mind and listening to you and applying everything you're saying to parts of my life. So that's just some of the aspects of that. And I really think that as humans, we can learn so much from each other. Like this, people are interesting. If you listen to them, you'll be able to really, just find out how interesting they are and how much you can learn from them and how much we can learn from each other.
Well, that's definitely my premise is, maybe there's a person out there, they just won't interest me personally, or I won't interest them personally, but in a broad network of 8 billion people, everybody's going to be interesting to somebody else in some way. Okay.
People are going to think differently, and some are going to be more curious than others, and some are going to be more apt to thinking about certain things than other people. And that's great, because that's how we have engineers, and we have janitors, and we have, all these different careers that we can... we need janitors, and we need engineers. So it's great that there's a lot of diversity in people and thought, because that's how God made us.
In what way, let me put it that way, in what way did thinking about thinking make you who you are today?
Who knows?
This is not science. We can't go back. We don't have a control Jesse and an experimental Jesse. But
I can answer your question. I think who God has made me to be is I'm an introspective person, and I'm an introvert. I like being alone with my thoughts for long periods of time. But I don't just want to be alone with my own thoughts and be an echo chamber for myself. So I've always loved learning and reading and studying from other people. Okay, what do they say? What does this person say? And not really going to one person. And I actually love reading arguments that I don't agree with so that I can learn more about my beliefs and my arguments and form better arguments.
Which is a dying art in the world of social media, where people tend to create their friend list out of the people who won't argue with them and make them uncomfortable. And when somebody does, all you have to do is click unfriend.
Yeah.
So the idea that, that's the mentality behind good old-fashioned debate. of 100 and 200 and 1,000 years ago was the arguments would be presented, both sides would be presented to the public, and they could hear, and evaluate. And that all came about because you liked Sherlock Holmes, huh?
Yeah.
Do you like detective stories in general, or was it specifically him because of the way he was written?
I think it was probably specifically him. I don't feel like I didn't read a lot of mystery novels. I've always just loved reading, so I've loved sci-fi. I think because every novel is a mystery novel, you don't know what's going to happen.
If it's well written. Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen, so I always felt like the detective. And oh my goodness, I watch movies and shows with my parents, and like just by a few scenes in, I've had it figured out, and they're like, "What's going to happen?" I'm like, I guess I won't spoil it or ruin it.
Well, the problem there is Hollywood.
That is
and
too.
They know the kinds of movies that will sell the most tickets, which is what they want to do. And so they don't want to make some weird movie over here to the side that defies the rules. Because I've seen it too. Yeah, you just about any movie these days, once you're halfway through, you know how it's going to end. You know how it's going to resolve, especially if it's anything like a sci-fi, a romantic comedy. They don't stimulate thought. They don't really get you going, because there's a comfort zone that most people fit in, and that's how you sell more tickets, and that's how you make more money. So
remember that boredom's a function of predictability. So the more you know and can foresee, the more bored you are. I think Solomon was one of the most bored people ever. And I think Ecclesiastes is proof of that. He talks about never finding fulfillment in anything and having all that wisdom, It's like, what's new?
If I've learned nothing else today, I like that expression. Boredom is a function of predictability.
Yeah.
And
that stuck with me.
Even if I don't use it on myself, I have 3 kids, and all of them have said at some point in their lives so far, "I'm bored."
Yeah.
Okay.
And when they say that, that actually probably starts with them. It's like, well, be interesting. Make your mind an interesting place. Fill it with interesting things. But then find something to do that's interesting. And fill your life.
Well, that's what my wife and I tell them. Well, go do something.
Yeah.
We probably need to proactively, at their age, nudge them forward a little bit. It takes time to reach a point where you can tell yourself to go make life interesting. Although at the same time, all 3 of them, when they were younger, we would hear them in their bedroom for hours being both sides of a dramatic scene with their stuffed animals or cars or something like that. So kids can entertain themselves for long times. Yeah. But I guess eventually they reach a point in any given day where they get tired of that activity.
I don't think humans as a whole are getting shorter attention spans. I think that we're just getting a lot of formulaic, boring stuff thrown at us. So, of course, we're not going to pay attention because it's boring.
No, because it's definitely not the overall attention span, because when you give a young person something that interests him, he will stick with it for a long time. Yeah. I know, sociologists or whatever department this falls under, we're looking at the shorter and shorter lengths of YouTube videos, and then the invention of these things called vines, which were 8-second videos. And admittedly, as a filmmaker, I find that some of them can actually be very clever. Somebody can create quite the interesting joke or funny juxtaposition of images in 8 seconds. Yeah. But the birth of those things probably arises more from just an uninteresting world, and not just because we can't handle longer. Yeah. And I stop and think Titanic was over 3 hours long, and that movie was in theaters longer than any other movie since I was born. And that was supposedly when we were losing our attention spans. Yeah. So,
and the Avengers are super long movies, and people seem to sit through those fine. And that, I think, actually takes us back to like the mystery novel and like Sherlock Holmes. We love mystery. We're curious. Like, there's been some things that man, why am I entertained by this? Well, it's just because I don't know what's going to happen. That's the only reason. And that, like, something about that, as humans, we want to find the solution or find the answer.
All right, we will go ahead and wrap up there. We've been talking today with Jesse Cole and his lifetime of thinking about thinking. And if all goes well, someday out there, a few years from now maybe? Sooner or later, you might even see his name.
It's a mystery.
On bookstore shelves under the what section? Are you going to Barnes and Noble? Maybe it's self-help philosophy. Okay, under the philosophy section. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jesse, for joining me today on Nobody You Know. Thank you, all of you, for watching. If you enjoyed today's program, make sure you click the like button. If you enjoy the channel as a whole, click the subscribe button and then the little bell next to it, which gives you a notification every time I upload a new video, which, if all goes well, is every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to be on the program, send me an email at 10thandfur@outlook.com. As usual, as I've said before, on my budget, I'm kind of limited to Oregon right now, but we'll see what we can do if you're a little further out from there and your story truly is fascinating and it's worth sharing with the world. I think everybody has some part of their life that's worth sharing with the world. Everyone is interesting. You don't have to be famous to be fascinating. I'm Brian Johnson. This is Nobody You Know, only now you do.